So in my work as a business consultant, I get to work regularly with individuals who are wanting to start a business, are in the early stages of starting their business, or have even been operating a business for a while. So I get to see, people in different industries. I get a lot of different questions. I get to hear different perspectives on business. And through this experience, I found that a lot of people have some misconceptions about business, whether that's starting a business or even just how businesses operate. And I find certain ones come up pretty regularly. So I wanted to make a video addressing those 12 most common misconceptions about starting or operating a small business. So the first misconception that I commonly see is that sole proprietorship businesses cannot have employees. Now, a sole proprietorship business is just a form of legal structure. You can operate in just about any industry under that legal structure, but a sole proprietorship just means sole proprietor, sole owner, one owner. So with a sole proprietorship business, there's only one owner, but that doesn't mean you can only have one person working in the business. You can have multiple employees working in a sole proprietorship business. So yes, it's true that you can only have one owner as a sole proprietorship, but it's not true that you can't have employees. The second misconception that I see, and this is more so for Canadian businesses, is that people think that if you incorporate federally in Canada, that gives you the right to operate across Canada. And in a way that can be true, but that's really not the case, because if you federally incorporate in Canada, you're basically just getting name protection across Canada, and that actually doesn't give you the right to set up in any one province or multiple provinces. Once you federally incorporate it, you actually have to do what's called an extra provincial registration of your federal corporation in the province in which you're established. And now if you're setting up your business in multiple provinces, conducting business in multiple provinces, then typically you need to do that extra provincial registration of your federal corporation in multiple provinces. So just because you federally incorporated doesn't mean you can set up wherever you want and conduct business wherever you want. You have to do that extra provincial registration of your corporation in the provinces in which you're operating your federal corporation. Now, the third common misconception that I see is that people think they can't serve clients or customers in other provinces outside of the province in which their business is registered. Now, this can get a little bit complicated. It does depend, but just because you're just registered in Saskatchewan or Alberta doesn't mean you can't serve clients in Manitoba or BC. Oftentimes, you don't even necessarily have to register the business in those other provinces. So for example, if you set up a business in Alberta doing website design and someone in Ontario finds you and they want you to create a website for them, there's no reason why you can't serve that client or that customer. And in that case like that, where you're not actually advertising in Ontario, you're not setting up an office in Ontario, you don't have employees working there, typically you don't even have to register the business there in any form. You can just serve those clients from Alberta or wherever it is that you're based. So just because your business is only registered in one province doesn't mean you can't serve clients in other provinces or even in other countries. The fourth misconception I see is that write-offs are just some type of magic, where if it's a business expense, it's a write-off and it doesn't count. You get your money back from the government or something like that. But a write-off or a business expense doesn't really mean that. It just means that you have an expense for your business, which reduces your net income from business, which then reduces the amount of tax that you'll have to pay. But if you have a write-off or a business expense for $100, let's say, you're still losing that $100. That's still going out towards this expense. Now, because you made that expense, your net income from business activity would drop by $100, which means the amount of money you're taxed on will fall by $100. And so in most cases, that's not even going to be really significant, right? You might pay $12 less in income tax, or maybe $25 less in income tax because you spent $100, but it's not like you get that $100 back or something like that. The fifth common misconception that I see among business owners is that you need a business loan for any type of cost or startup expense when it comes to a business. And while sometimes a business loan is the most suitable, there are other ways to finance a business that can be superior in some cases. Maybe sometimes that's just getting a line of credit. Maybe that's getting a vehicle loan. Maybe that's getting a mortgage. So if you're purchasing land and a building for your business, I probably wouldn't get a business loan. I would get a mortgage. If you're purchasing a commercial vehicle, again, I probably wouldn't get a business loan. I would most likely get a vehicle loan. And if you're, say, starting a construction business where you just need a temporary loan to get some materials for your first project, again, I probably wouldn't get a business loan. I would probably just get a business line of credit. So it really does depend on the situation, but don't think that because you need to borrow money to set up or operate your business, that a business loan is the best form of borrowing to do so. Okay, so number 6, when it comes to common misconceptions that I see, is that people think that when they're starting a business, they need a formal business plan written. And in some cases, you very much do need a formal business plan, but in a lot of cases, you don't. I write formal business plans professionally, and when I started my business, I did not write a formal business plan for my business. The main reason why you would need a formal business plan, like a 30-page written document on your business, would be if you are applying for a business loan. There are some other situations as well where you would need one, but if you're just using your own money to fund the startup of your business, then you typically don't need a formal business plan. So don't feel like you need to write this 40-page business plan just because you're starting a business. I do recommend reviewing different business plans and going over those steps and thinking about those things, because it is a really good practice, but you're not gonna have to put in 100 hours writing this document if you don't really need one. So keep that in mind. So the next one, number 7, a common misconception that I see is that people think registering your business and getting a business license are the same thing, and they're not. Registering your business, at least in Canada, typically you do that with the provincial business registry in your province, and then getting a business license is a completely separate thing, which you do afterwards once the business actually is registered and exists. And the business license that you get after registering the business is issued through your city, so your municipality. And that's just a license to operate a business that you've registered through the business registry. So those are 2 completely different things. So the next one, number 8 for misconceptions. People think that you need to be really active on social media as a business owner, if you're operating a business. And in some cases, that's true. It's super important to be active on social media, and that's where your clients are going to find you. And maybe you have an online business where all your sales are generated through social media and through your website and things like that. But it's not mandatory. There are plenty of successful businesses that never have had social media accounts, never use them. Business owners maybe don't even know how to use them. So don't think that just because you have a business that you need to have all these different social media accounts and you need to be posting every day or something. The next common misconception, number 9, is that cash sales don't count. If you're operating a business, or even if it's kind of an informal business and people are paying you in cash, then, it doesn't really count. You don't have to claim that. That's not how it works. It doesn't matter how you get paid. Is that cash? Is that credit? Is that debit? Is that cryptocurrency? Is that barter? If you're engaging in business activity, you're supposed to report that on your taxes. So just be aware of that, because just because you're not having some type of digital record of your transactions doesn't mean it's not business activity. And if you were audited by the government for taxes and they found that out, there could be penalties for not reporting that properly. So number 10, when it comes to common misconceptions, is that you don't have to pay income tax until you reach a certain amount of revenue in your business. And in some ways that could be the case, but it really depends. It depends on your jurisdiction, your tax situation, and things like that. If you have your basic personal amount in Canada, if you're contributing to RRSPs, FHSAs, if you have a lot of business expenses, if you're running your business as a sole proprietorship, it might end up that you could generate, who knows, maybe $40,000 and not actually have to pay any income tax on that business activity. But there is really no minimum. Once you start making profit from business activity, that profit is considered taxable income. The next one, number 11, people think sometimes that you don't have to file business taxes if you don't have revenue from business. And in a way that makes sense. Why would you bother filing taxes if you haven't actually made any money? Well, for starters, when it comes to sales tax accounts, sometimes with the sales tax like GST, PST, you still have to file your quarterly or annual remittances, even if you're not making money, and there can be penalties if you don't file them. Now, when it comes to income tax, you're still supposed to file your income tax, but you might not actually have to pay any income tax. But it could still be beneficial to file your taxes and include your business activity, even if you're not making any sales, because if you have expenses, then your business activity was generating a negative net income. And if that's the case, especially as a sole proprietorship, you can apply that money as a loss and put it against your employment income if you have a job, and therefore pay less income tax on your employment income. So yes, you're still supposed to, and in some cases it might be beneficial. And when it comes to sales taxes, there may be penalties if you don't. And the last common misconception, number 12, this is one I see sometimes as well. People think it's expensive to start a business. And it can be, of course, if you're starting a restaurant, that could be expensive. If you're starting an airline, a car dealership, a car wash, something like that, that could be really expensive. But not every business is expensive to start up. What if you just wanted to start a business doing graphic design or some type of coaching or web design or video editing or some type of consulting even. You don't really have a lot of startup costs. Like, it should be, in most cases, under $1,000 to get everything going. It might even just be a few $100s. So really depends on the business and how you approach it, but starting a business doesn't necessarily need to be expensive. So that's my list of 12 common misconceptions seen among people that are wanting to start a business, are in the early stages of starting a business, or even have been operating a business for a while. Thought I'd make a video on that. Hopefully it was helpful. If so, please click like and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel here, where I currently have over 270 videos that cover business startup and business management topics.